When the lights go out, I think that's my cue to get up here. Turn the heat up. All right, we are studying in the book of Hebrews, and last week we got into chapter 7, which is a study of Melchizedek. And of course, we want to keep in mind the theme of the book, Jesus is better. And the reason that the book has this theme is that these Hebrew Jewish Christians were about to forsake Christ and go back to the law of Moses because of the persecution they were suffering. Their thinking was, well, we didn't suffer like this as a Jew under the law of Moses, so let's go back and serve God under the law of Moses. So the book is written to dissuade them from that and to encourage them to remain faithful to Christ. We talked about Melchizedek a little last week. Let me go back and just talk just a little bit more about that. In the very first part of chapter 7, the writer says, first, his name, talking about Melchizedek, means king of righteousness, and also king of Salem means king of peace. Some commentaries suggest this may have been a miraculous manifestation of Jesus. I'm not so sure that's a correct understanding of that, but at least something to think about. Jesus was also called Prince of Peace. There's some similarities there between Melchizedek. Melchizedek was a high priest, and Jesus is our high priest today, and we'll get more into that a little later. And Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. I don't think that's suggesting that he was Melchizedek, but it's showing that before and from the very beginning, Jesus has existed. I am. I was there. I've been there. To add to the confusion, the writer then says, without father or mother, without genealogy, without beginning of days or end of life. Talked a little bit about that last week. When I was growing up as a small child and studying the scripture, that really puzzled me. How in the world could someone exist without being born, without having a father or mother, beginning of days or end of life? But then a further study of the book of Hebrews explains that. He miraculously appeared without having a physical father or mother, nor beginning of days nor end of life, no genealogy. That's the first impression you might get by reading that. Priests under the Old Testament had to be descendants of Levi. And they served a specific time as priests. The Levites were required to serve from the age of 30 to 50, 20 years. Here are the passages that deal with that. After the age of 50, they were relieved from the more arduous and severe duties of their office. So when it says that Melchizedek had no father or mother, it means in the priesthood, because the priesthood did not exist. The Aaronic priesthood did not exist at that time. He had no beginning of days or end of life. The writer is not saying he had no mother or father. He had no mother or father in the priesthood. Levi had not yet been born. He had no genealogy in the Levitical priesthood. So he seems to have appeared for a specific reason back before the priesthood was even established in the Old Testament. He had no beginning or end of life as a priest. As the Levitical priesthood, they served 20 years and then they had to step down. He was a priest forever until he died. Unlike the Levitical priest who served only 20 years. This doesn't mean that he lived forever. He was a priest as long as he lived. Verse 3 says, like the Son of God, he remains a priest forever. Now you may be thinking, why in the world is he talking about Melchizedek? Well, what does this have to do with the situation they're in? The writer is showing the priesthood of Christ is like to that of Melchizedek. I guarantee you that every Jewish Christian had a knowledge of Melchizedek. They knew who he was. And what, again, the writer is trying to show the superiority of Christ over the Levitical priesthood, over Melchizedek. Christ had no descendants in the Levitical priesthood. He was born from the tribe of Judah. So there's similarities here, and I think this is what the writer is trying to point out. The writer establishes the greatness of Melchizedek. Just think how great he was. Even the patriarch Abraham gave him a tenth of the plunder. Now, why would Abraham be brought into the picture at this point? Who was Abraham as far as the Jews were concerned? Father of the Jewish nation. What's the writer doing? Think how great Melchizedek was, that even the father of your Jewish nation gave a tenth of the spoils to Melchizedek. You see what he's doing? He's again laying the foundation to show the superiority of Christ. Verse 5, now the law requires the descendants of Levi who become priests to collect a tenth from the people. See the similarity there? Melchizedek did the same thing. That is, their brothers, even though their brothers are descended from Abraham. Deuteronomy 14 says, be sure to set aside a tenth of all that your fields produce each year. That's a requirement. Deuteronomy 14 again continues, and do not neglect the Levites living in your towns, for they have no allotment or inheritance of their own. At the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithes of that year's produce and store it in your towns, so that the Levites, who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, and the aliens, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. Why in the world do you think the writer of the Hebrew letter would talk about this, refer to this? What would be the significance of that? Again, showing the superiority of the system they're under to the one they wanted to go back to. Melchizedek received a tenth from Abraham. Abraham was the father of the Jewish nation. Therefore, Melchizedek was greater than Abraham. Christ is in the order of Melchizedek, therefore he's greater, he's better. That's the point he's making here. This man, however, did not trace his descendant from Levi, talking about Melchizedek still, yet he collected a tenth from Abraham and blessed him who had the promises. The writer is showing that Melchizedek was not of the priestly order, yet Abraham paid tithes to him. Christ was not of the priestly order. So that's the comparison there with Melchizedek. And Melchizedek blessed Abraham. In the one case, the tenth is collected by men who die. But in the other case, by him who is declared to be living. Who's he talking about here? Melchizedek and Christ. Melchizedek, the man who died. In the other case, Christ, who's declared to be living. See the superiority? See what he's doing here? And it seems really confusing. Why would he bring all this up? To show the superiority of Christ. They want to go back to a system that's inferior and forsake Christ. The priest who served under the Levitical priesthood died. Christ, our high priest, lives forever. So, see the difference. Melchizedek died. His priesthood ended. The Levitical priest died. Their priesthood ended. Christ, our high priest, lives forever. No end to his reign as priest. Another evidence of the superiority of Christ. This is really the bottom line as to why he mentions Melchizedek in the first place, showing that Melchizedek died. Those who were priests under the Levitical priesthood died, but Christ is living. He's still alive. Jim?
When Abraham gave 10% of the plunder, was that sort of like tithing to
Yes.
the assembling of God?
Right. And as the passage we looked at in Leviticus, it was to help the poor and the homeless and those who were in need. That tithe, that tenth, yeah. Okay. Melchizedek is greater than Abraham, therefore greater than the Levitical priests. See, Melchizedek was great. They understood that. He's proving more evidence of the superiority of Christ over the Levitical priests. Now, they all knew what the Levitical priesthood was all about. They served under the Levitical priesthood. Christ is a priest after the order of Melchizedek. Had no genealogy in the priesthood, had no father, mother in the priesthood, like Melchizedek. Without the doubt, the lesser person is blessed by the greater. Now, wait a minute. Who is the lesser person in this verse? Abraham. Who was the greater? Melchizedek, exactly. Abraham, who was lesser, was blessed by the greater. The lesser person, Abraham, is blessed by the greater, Melchizedek. That the superior blesses the inferior is a general proposition, but Abraham was blessed of Melchizedek, therefore Melchizedek was what? Greater than Abraham. Again, laying the foundation to show that Christ is better. Verses 9 and 10. One might even say that Levi, who collects the tenth, paid the tenth through Abraham, because when Melchizedek met Abraham, Levi was still in the body of his ancestor. Kind of interesting that he's pointing out that Levi, even though he wasn't born, paid a tenth through Abraham's actions here with Melchizedek. This is saying that Levi, through Abraham, paid tithes to Melchizedek. So Melchizedek's priesthood, therefore, was greater than Levi's and the Levitical priesthood. Therefore, Christ's priesthood, which is after the order of Melchizedek, is greater than Levi's. See, he's saying all of this to establish these points here. Verse 11, interesting. If perfection could have been attained through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of the law was given to the people, why was there still need for another priest to come, one in the order of Melchizedek, not in the order of Aaron? They want to go back to the old law. They want to go back and serve God under the Levitical priesthood. If perfection could have been obtained in that manner, he's asking why was there a need for another priest like Melchizedek to appear on the scene? It would have been unnecessary. So his point is that perfection could not be attained through the Levitical law. Period. It could not be obtained. Another way of showing the inferiority of the Levitical priest and the superiority of Christ as a priest. Verse 12, for when there is a change of the priesthood, there must also be a change of the law. When the office of the Levitical priesthood was superseded by one of a wholly different order, the law which had regulated them vanished also or ceased to be binding. Why is that true? Well, because under the law of Moses, you can only be a priest if you're from the tribe of Levi. So since Christ appeared, he wasn't from the tribe of Levi, yet he's a high priest. There had to be a change in the law. It's just as simple as that. That's what he's saying. An introduction to the inferiority of the law of Moses that they want to go back under and try to serve God under. For it is clear that our Lord descended from Judah, and in regard to that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. And what we have said is even more clear if another priest like Melchizedek appears. One who has become a priest not on the basis of a regulation, law, as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life. Again, showing that Christ was a priest after the order of Melchizedek, but he's from the wrong tribe. He's from the tribe of Judah, which was what did the tribe of Judah produce? David, but what else? Levi produced what? Priest. Tribe of Judah produced kings. Thank you, Lester. That's what I was getting at. Produced kings, right. So here's one who's become a priest, not on the order of a regulation, the law, but as to his ancestry, but on the basis of the power of an indestructible life. Jesus lives forever. That's going back to the idea that the high priest under the law of Moses had to serve only 20 years and then step down. Christ has an indestructible life. Bruce?
You know, one of the things that is being introduced here are really all three covenants. The patriarchal age, which Melchizedek was under, and Abraham was under. And so God dealt directly with the heads of households.
Okay.
A lot of people think that may have been what Melchizedek was doing.
Mm-hmm.
He was a king and a priest. Maybe he was instructing the heads of households exactly what God required. But the law of Moses and the Levitical priesthood and all that was inferior to God dealing directly with them like he is now through Jesus.
Okay.
So it's a difficult study. It's complicated. I know it's not something we go into a great deal of detail, but I think it would help us if we understand the patriarchal age,
Okay.
which that law, continued on with the Gentiles while the Mosaical law was for the Jews.
Okay.
And so we understand the patriarchal law it'll help us with this
Okay.
context.
All right. And that's what he's referring to here. The former regulation. The former regulation is set aside. It is declared you are a priest forever. Talking about Christ in the order of Melchizedek. The former regulation, that patriarchal law, is set aside because it was weak and useless, for the law made nothing perfect. He repeats that. And a better hope is introduced by which we draw near to God. Again, simply making a comparison. Bob?
And we're on verse 12 is very interesting. We're under a law of grace.
Right,
And
right.
So that's what it talks about, the change of the law also.
Right, exactly,
It's
right.
very important that he was trying to teach them that.
Right, exactly. Okay, very good. All right. Now, there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in office. Why? Because when they died, their service was over. But because Jesus lives forever, this is important, he has a permanent priesthood. Is he serving as high priest today? Yes. Until the end of time, he'll serve as priest. The Lord has sworn and will not change his mind, you are a priest forever. Here's this point. Because of this oath, Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. Better than the patriarchal covenant. Better than the law of Moses. He's better because the regular priests, they died. Their priesthood ended at death. But Christ is a priest forever. Now there have been many of those priests since death prevented them from continuing in the office. But because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, here's the result of that. He is able to save completely, King James Version says, to the uttermost, those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Intercedes as what? As a priest. That's what he's talking about. He's interceding always for them, therefore he's able to save them completely. The work of the priest ended at death. He can no longer intercede for the people. But Christ lives forever. He's a priest forever. Therefore, he always lives to intercede for us as high priest. So Christ is better than the old covenant priest because he can save completely. And there's no end to his priesthood. What does it mean to be saved completely? When the priest offered sacrifice for sin under the old law, for the previous sins, right. Right, and not only did they offer sin for the people, who else did they offer for? Themselves. The priest had to offer sacrifice for themselves. And their sacrifice was offered for previous sins. And I don't like the expression rolled ahead. I don't think that's scriptural. But every year they had to make a sacrifice all over again for the same sins that they had committed. There was no complete forgiveness of sin. It can make no one perfect. Brother David?
You said it. Every year they had to do it over again. It was only good for 1 year.
Right. But Christ, as our high priest, did what? Offered once and for all. And he didn't have to offer one for himself either, because he was sinless. Something impossible under the old law. Why is he mentioning this? They want to go back to the old law. They want to go back to that which could not make them perfect. They wanted to go back and try to serve God all over again with these same inferiorities that existed under the law of Moses. Lenny?
We are priests, are we not, Christ?
What, say that again?
Our high priest.
Yeah, Christ is our high priest, right.
We are a priest.
And he'll be a high priest forever, according to what the writer here says, a high priest forever. Such a high priest, talking about Christ now, meets our need. One who is holy, blameless, pure, set apart from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. Here are 5 reasons Christ, as our high priest, is superior to the Levitical priests. Look at those 5 again. Holy, couldn't say that about Levi priest. Blameless, couldn't say that about them. Pure, couldn't say that. Set apart from sinners, you couldn't say that because they were a sinner offered from themselves. And exalted above the heavens. So Christ is superior. Christ is a better high priest. Why do you want to go back? Why do you want to leave the very best and go back to something that's not as good? None of this could be said about the Levitical priesthood. They had to offer sacrifices for their own sins before they offered for the sins of the people. Hebrews 7, verse 27, unlike the other high priests, he does not need to offer sacrifices day after day, first for his own sin and then for the sins of the people. He's talking about Christ. Now, he's not like the other high priest. He had no sin. He didn't have to offer a sacrifice for his own sin. He sacrificed for their sins once for all when he offered himself. What a wonderful system we live under today. And if the writer is trying to make these Hebrew Christians, you're going to give all that up to understand this. No need for a continual sacrifice for sin. Why? Christ offered it once and for all of us. We don't have to go to Jerusalem every year and offer an animal sacrifice. Yeah, thank goodness, right, exactly. So Christ did it all for us. He made a once-for-all sacrifice when he sacrificed himself. And this made him greater than Melchizedek, greater than that priesthood. For the law appoints as high priest men who are weak. Why? Because they're fleshly. But the oath which came after the law appointed the Son, Christ, who has been made perfect forever. Under the law of Moses, these high priests who were appointed, they were weak, they were fleshly, they were sinful. But Christ came after that law, appointed as a high priest who's been made perfect forever. Again, it's taken a long time to do this, but apparently he felt that they needed a lot of persuasion to realize that they were giving up the superior for the inferior. Additional evidence of the superiority of Christ's priesthood over the Levitical priesthood. The Levitical high priests were weak. Christ as a high priest is perfect. See the difference? Another contrast. The point of what we're saying is this. We do have such a high priest who sat down at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heaven, and who serves in the sanctuary, the true tabernacle, set up by the Lord, not by man. See the difference here? Levitical priest entered the earthly sanctuary. Christ entered heaven at the right hand of God. So why would they want to go back? See what he's trying to do? He's trying to show them that To go back would be going back to something inferior. The Levitical tabernacle is made by man. The true tabernacle is made by the Lord. Lester?
I think in that part of the world, there's kind of an ancestry worship type thing where, you know, Abraham was revered so much and Moses was revered so much. I think by going back beyond them, he's showing that Christ's priesthood is even older.
Yeah, right. Yeah, because he's like Melchizedek. Melchizedek actually was a representative of the priesthood of Christ. That's what he's trying to show. Very good point, yeah. So every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices, and so it was necessary for this one, Christ, also to have something to offer. Okay? Levitical priest offered animals. Christ also offered something. What did he offer? He offered himself. Kathy?
I agree with what the author is saying as far as the superiority, but I often have wondered if we had to sacrifice animals every time we sinned, would we be more careful not to sin?
It didn't keep the Jews from being more careful not to sin, because they kept committing, they kept right on sinning.
For some of them, but I mean, it just, sometimes I think that we take Jesus' sacrifice for granted.
Yeah.
Like, we don't really see how serious our sin is.
Well, you're right about that, but the animal sacrifice is not a deterrent from sin, because they kept doing it over and over and over again. That's the reason they had to continually every year come and offer sacrifices.
That's why you did it. You said, Charles, you did it. Because you knew that that wasn't deterred. You think about all the bad priests. I think about when Samuel, and the priest and the sons were corrupt. They were, and that's part of the issue where they had and then they wanted the king and whatever.
Yeah, okay.
I just think about all the corruption per se.
Okay.
Yeah, so, it was, that's what you needed, as you said, the whole sacrifice. And you knew that, I think it was a foregone conclusion, that's why they needed it. They felt that they needed it.
Okay. I could offer an animal sacrifice at the end of the year, and the sins previously committed were done away with. But guess what? I don't have to worry about committing sin from now until the next sacrifice. See,
They had to offer a sacrifice every day if they sinned. That's
What-
if they really
well,
were
but
following
they
the law of
but
Moses.
they were supposed to. But actually, the sacrifice of the high priest is what took away their previous sins. So if they didn't have that,
They couldn't offer sacrifices every day.
not every day,
They
no.
didn't live in Jerusalem.
Right,
The only place that sacrifices were offered was at the temple.
at the temple, the
So they had
sanctuary.
Special times when they would come, for instance, if they had a first son,
Yeah.
then they would to come and offer sacrifice. But it was a great burden to come many miles from Galilee or wherever to come down and
And I
to
think
offer
the law said
sacrifices
that.
daily would have been real.
But I think the law was set up that they were supposed to, whether, they got put into captivity, so I know that. But I mean, when I read some of the Levitical laws, it said that every day, if they sinned, they were supposed to bring a sacrifice that day.
Yeah. Well, the sacrifice for sin, the ultimate sacrifice for sin, was done once a year by the high priest. They had to go to Jerusalem. He talks about back up to the sanctuary made by man that they came to offer their sacrifice at. The one that they were under, we're under today, was made by the Lord. Okay.
When we compare ourselves to Christ, the only one who was without sin, how he lived, how he thought, what he did, then we realize that we're never without sin.
Right.
It's just like I did something bad. It's like, what are we doing with our time, with our resources, and our thoughts, and the rest of the day, what we're going to do today, and then compare to what Jesus would do
Okay.
if he were here today. We realize that, and the Bible says straight up, I'm not just guessing here, it says that if we say we have no sin,
Yeah.
we're
Well,
lying. We're never not without sin, so we'd be just constantly killing animals. We wouldn't have time to eat because we'd be killing animals.
right. Yeah. And exactly. And granting the fact that maybe they did have to offer sacrifice every time they sin, I'll go offer my bull and then I'll sin, because I can offer sacrifice to take care of it. So sacrifice is not a deterrent from sinning. Never was. And that's why God set up Christ as the supreme sacrifice for sin from now on.
We'd be sinning while we're sacrificing for sin. comparing our mind to the mind of Christ.
Right, exactly, right. Okay, we'll have to stop here. We'll get into some more interesting things. Not next week, I'll be out of town preaching in Nistachata, but the following week, we'll get back to chapter 8. Appreciate all the comments and what's been said.